Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 29, A Star is Unborn. As per usual, we'll start with a brief summary of the episode. Maxwell refuses to partner with CC proclaimed avant-garde genius Philippe in his production of Romeo and Juliet, which Philippe promises has a happy ending through the removal of some scenes and the addition of others. In addition to revising one of the greatest love stories in history, Philippe plans to cast a fresh face with a unique voice as the star, and decides to cast Fran after hearing her yell about the location of something in the medicine chest. The Sheffields are less than supportive of Fran's theatrical debut, and Maggie tries to leverage Fran's plight to convince Maxwell to let her go away for the weekend to the Hamptons. Fran ultimately moves forward and accepts the role and recruits Maxwell to rehearse the balcony scene with her. Maxwell helps her by adding some physical realism and not only puts Fran on her balcony, but kisses her, as the script requires. While Cece proclaims that she would go in a different direction totally because the lovey-dovey stuff has been done to death, Fran and Maxwell are altered by the kiss. While Fran is out at rehearsal, the children run amok, resulting in a fight between Fran and Maxwell. Cece learns that Philippe cast Fran because he's looking for a tax write-off and shares his intel with Maxwell, who realizes that he can't tell Fran because she'll be crushed, but he also can't let her perform because she'll be publicly humiliated. He decides to talk to Fran, who thinks she knows what he's going to say, and concludes that she shouldn't make her big Broadway debut under Philippe's direction. Finally, in a last-ditch effort to go to the Hamptons, Maggie tries asking Maxwell for permission while he's dozing on the couch watching Masterpiece Theater, but yet again strikes out. Bernadette, do you want to add anything?
No, that was great.
Awesome, thank you. Would you like to take us to scene one?
Yes, so we open in the Sheffield living room. Fran and Niles come in and sigh as they kind of flop onto the couch, put up their feet, but very quickly, you hear yelling. The kids are yelling for Fran. Maxwell's yelling for Niles. Niles, in his classic Niles way, turns to Fran and says, "Was it as good for you as it was for me?" To which she replies, she was faking it.
Correct. A joke that children would not get.
Nope. Or one would hope.
Correct.
So Maggie comes in. It turns out her friends are going away for a weekend at the Hamptons. She's asking Fran if she can go. Fran asks, "Are there going to be boys?" Yeah. Parents? Oh, who cares about the parents? They'll find a way anyway.
They'll get in the way.
Yeah. And so Maggie's like, "Oh, so can I go?" And she's like, "Yeah, go have a blast. And when I get fired and you're sent to the convent, we can share letters and laugh
Right.
about this." So basically, again, Fran was kind of playing along, but ultimately is like, "Yeah, that's your dad's not going to let that happen."
Understandably.
And they actually walk off screen, but we're still in the living room, and CC and Maxwell come in with who we learn is Philippe.
Mm-hmm.
And CC's asking Maxwell, like, why is he refusing to work with Philippe? And Philippe's like trying to pitch this idea, it's Romeo and Juliet, but we actually follow them to heaven. And of course, this shocks Maxwell because he's British, and how dare you try to mutilate Shakespeare? And Philippe kind of plays it off of, "Oh yeah, we're not, we're just adding some stuff and taking some out." He doesn't get too into it aside from mentioning that you're going to follow them to heaven. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
happy ending. But Philippe mentions that, because upon the query from Axel and Cece, like whether there's a big name that would be attached to this show, he says, "No, I'm looking for someone unknown with a unique voice." And
Mm-hmm.
of course, it's at that time that Fran is yelling to the kids that they should check in the medicine chest between the corn pads and the monostat.
Yep.
She's walking down the stairs, and Philippe goes, "I found my Juliet." To which Fran's kind of just baffled, like, "What?" And
Exactly.
and again, so that's the opening bit we have set up for this episode. The two storylines, one um Maggie wanting to go to the Hamptons, and the other is going to be the major thing, I think,
Hmm.
Fran being cast as Juliet
Right.
for her unique voice.
Which is a very accurate description.
Yes, yes. Did you have anything to add to that?
The one line I thought worth noting is Maxwell says, "Well, I'm sorry, Philippe, but we British have a thing about mutilating Shakespeare. The Queen comes and hits you with her purse."
Yeah.
Because it's just he delivered it so well. Um, it almost sounded like the Queen would actually come and hit him with her purse if he was involved in this atrocity.
Mhm. Yeah.
So that's all I wanted to add. I guess I'll take us to the dining room.
Yes.
So it seems to be the next morning, and Fran is in yet another wonderful bathrobe, and she asks the family, "Can you imagine anything more ridiculous than me doing Shakespeare?" And Maxwell can't help himself by saying, "Well, yes, people paying to see it." And
Mhm.
so she explains, like, this would not be her true theater debut. That in high school, she played the Reverend Mother in The Sound of Music. Clearly, she didn't understand what the role was, because then she talks about how she put a deep scoop neck into her nun's habit, and those hills were alive.
Mhm.
Um, and we learned that Niles also was in the Sound of Music when he was in high school, and he played the Baroness, which gets everyone's attention. He's like, it was an all boys school. If he had
Mhm.
played the guitar, he would have been Maria.
Mhm.
And Maxwell and everyone else was surprised that he played the Baroness. Um, the children, who are normally, I think it's fair to say, they're normally supportive of Fran's endeavors, such as last week when she wanted to keep the baby that she got
Mhm.
on the subway. Um, Here, they're a bit less supportive.
Mhm.
I think Gracie says something like, "Fran, you can't do that. You can't do the play." And Brighton says, "Who will do our laundry, clean our room, wait on us hand and foot?" And Fran says, "Well, the same person who always does, Niles."
Mhm.
And, and so Fran comes up with this what seems to be a reasonable solution, that, well, I could rehearse while the kids are at school. And Maxwell rejects it out of hand. "I think not." And she says, "Why think you not?" And she explains, "I could use a life outside of this house." And of course, Maggie tries to use this to her advantage and says, it's basically the same reason I should be allowed to go to the Hamptons.
Mhm.
And Maxwell basically says to her, "Nice try," and then turns back to Fran and explains that taking care of the children is a full time job. And Fran snarkily says, "And I suppose it was my idea to have three."
Mhm.
So, yeah. Do you want to add anything?
Mhm. Yeah, and I found it interesting that like at the after they're having this exchange, um, he goes so far as to say, it would be an embarrassing theatrical debut for her or experience for her. And so Fran's like, "Well, look who's getting cut out of my Oscar speech." And Maxwell's like, "It would actually be a Tony." And then I think Niles says actually it would be such and such because it's an off-Broadway show. I didn't catch that. But then Maxwell just says, "Well, she's not gonna be winning anything." And that really sets Fran up. Like, she's mad and she's like she kind of stores out like, "Well, that's it. I'm gonna do it, and there's nothing you can do about it." And then so Maggie gets up and says and tries to copy her and in term with the Hamptons, but Maxwell's just like, "Sit down, Margaret." And she's like, "Okay." And she sits down. So, again, there's this parallel with, like you were saying earlier, Maggie's trying to kind of use Fran's situation to advance her own agenda in attending that weekend at the Hamptons. That's not really working out for her.
No, no. Needless to say, Maggie is not as forceful as Fran.
Yeah. Well, totally different positions too, her being like, what, 14, 15.
15, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so if it's okay with you, I'll take us to the living room.
Absolutely. I don't know how you want to divide up the next
Yeah,
couple
it's a
things.
little
So,
interesting. Um, I'll let you take over at the hallway and continue after that. But
oh, okay. Or do you want to do the hallway and then I can pick up when we're
yeah,
back in the living
it
room?
whichever it works.
I
But
don't care. So,
yeah, it's very quick. So, we're in the living room and the kids are actually on the couch in their uniforms and Fran's going to be rehearsing and she asks Niles to play Romeo. And Gracie's like, "Isn't he too old?" And Maggie's like, "Actually, Juliet would be around my age. So Fran would be," and she doesn't finish that sentiment. Um, but anyway, again, Niles is ready to show off his acting prowess. Again, he had that earlier experience as the Baroness in The Sound of
mhm.
Music, and he spent a summer at Stratford upon Avon, and to which Fran notes that she spent a summer selling Avon.
Yep.
So anyway, Niles, gets very much into it, anon, like going saying it, but if Fran isn't too happy about it, she's like, "Back off, Baroness." Um, i- she they kind of have a snarky back and forth. I don't have everything to it, but it ends with a Fran saying, "Shut it uppeth." Um, and then she tries to say her line, and instead of saying gentle, she says Gentile. And
Not quite the same.
yeah, of course, Niles corrects her. And but Fran being Fran says, "What, did I look down his pant or his tights? Gentle, not Gentile. What, did I look down his tights?" And then again, out in the hallway, just briefly, we cut to Cece and Maxwell. And again, they're still talking about the whole fact that Fran's been hired to it. And Cece says only an idiot would um, hire her to do anything. But of course, Maxwell has hired her to be the nanny.
hmm
Kind of a look there. I did want to note here as well, because I forgot to mention it in the first scene. There's yet another inconsistency with the set because
Yes.
it used to be a swinging door that you would come into. At times it's connected to the kitchen directly, sometimes it's connected to a butler's pantry, and sometimes it's connected to this hallway. Well, instead of a swinging door, we now have two double doors that you have to like open, like classic doors. So that again, just an inconsistency with the actual house setup.
It's funny that you mentioned that because there's another inconsistency later in this episode that I caught. I didn't catch this one that you mentioned.
Hmm.
Um, so they're just playing fast and loose with the set today.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So
Um,
did you have anything to add to that part of
no,
it?
no,
Okay.
I just really want to get to the next part of it.
Yes. Go for it.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So Maxwell and Cece were leaving Maxwell's office and they're going into the living room. And Fran basically is willing to drop Niles like a hot potato and says, "Oh, Mr. Sheffield, if you have a minute, I could use your help." And Niles says, "That's the understatement of the century." And
Mhm.
so, she basically recruits Maxwell and, he talks about how much he loves this play. And, he actually offers, "Shall I play the Romeo to your Juliet?" And, Cece Cece was going to leave because Fran had made a comment about who the hell is Faye and why is she waxing during a party because of a
Mhm.
line in the script. Um, to be full disclosure, I did not rewrite the entire script from Romeo and Juliet that they quote, so I'm sorry if that's what you were hoping I did. Um, but so Cece was gonna, she says, "Haha, good luck," and was gonna leave. But then Maxwell makes the offer, "Shall I play the Romeo to your Juliet?" And Fran counts down 5, 4, 3, 2. "What took you so long?" Because Cece has come back to watch. And so Maxwell says to Fran, "Now, we're star-crossed lovers. Let's get some physical realism into this." And she's like, "Oh, Mr. Sheffield." And he basically leads her to the staircase. And he says that he's putting her on her balcony. And, you know, so he has the script and she starts with the Romeo, Romeo. And he tells her, maybe be a little bit more lilting, more melodic. And she says, "Okay. Oh, Romeo, Romeo." and I can't imitate her, unfortunately. And he's like, no, 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 let me show you how it's done. And so she comes off the staircase and he goes up and he then does the line and he does it better, clearly much better. And France says, wow, you British guys really know how to play women.
Yeah.
And so then she goes back up on her balcony and, they do the scene, you know, um, you know, she says things like, doth thy name and take all of me. And he says, I take thee at thy word, call me but love, and I shall be new baptized. And then she continues with the scene, oh, parting is such sweet sorrow. Um, anyway, I don't have, I thought I had the whole dialogue memorized, but clearly I don't. But they get to the end of the scene and the script tells them to kiss. So they do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just a little peck on the lips, it's a real kiss between them.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why I wanted to talk about the scene. As Maxwell's doing this, Cece kind of tries to jump in and say things like, if I were directing this, I'd go a whole different direction because this whole lovey-dovey stuff has been done to death. And she's clearly not thrilled. She's clearly upset that Maxwell's kissing Fran. They at the end of the kiss, Maxwell says to her, much better. And she says, I think I'm starting to get the hang of it now. And as she's coming down the stairs, she's clearly so impacted by the kiss that she sort of trips on the stairs.
Yeah, it's kind of a stumble, like her legs are weak.
Yeah, like she's weak in the knees. Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Or that she's a little dizzy, that, the kiss was so charged, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
that it sort of broke her concentration. And, so she gets off the stairs and she says, of course, I'm going to need a lot of coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, Maxwell is just grinning.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, and I would just add, so like as they're doing before the kiss, you know, Fran's on the stairwell as the balcony,
mhm,
and Maxwell actually kind of jumps up to the other side to meet her, like up
mhm,
there, as if he climbed up the balcony. And like their faces are close together and it's like intense. Like their
mhm,
faces at each other, like leading up to the kiss. Like they're mesmerized by each other. It's
mhm.
very good.
And there's one point where Maxwell looks at the script, but then most of the time he's not looking at the script at all because, as you put it, he's mesmerized.
Yes. Yep.
I love
And
this scene so
Cece's just
much.
like standing down for, like on the ground with her arms crossed, like very displeased.
Yes, I love this scene just so
Mhm.
much. Okay,
Mhm.
that's all. I needed to say that again. Would you
Okay.
like to take us to the next scene?
Yes. So in the next scene, we are again in the living room, but obviously time has passed because Brighton and Gracie are running around. There's been a fort constructed with blankets all around the living room. Uh, Brighton and Gracie have like water guns,
Super
and
soakers.
yeah, like Brighton's chasing, like actually using the water inside.
Yeah.
In the background, like further back in the living room, you can see the blow up scream thing that Gracie had gotten as a Christmas present before.
Hmm.
Um, but anyway, so it's chaotic, and Brighton is telling Gracie, "I'm Dracula. I'm gonna," and she's not scared at all. And then so Brighton shifts gears and says, I'm the Cece monster and I'm gonna marry your father and send you off to boarding school. And Gracie screams and runs.
Yep.
Um, yeah. So Maxwell comes in clearly frazzled. You don't have to scream at, like, what's going on? Why aren't you in bed? And Brighton's like, I wasn't tired. And uh again, apparently, maybe it's because you ate the pound of chocolate I told you shouldn't. And Brighton's like, or drink the gallon of Kool-Aid.
Hmm.
And
Cola.
then, oh, cola. Okay. Um, and then, Maxwell turns to Gracie, like, why are you still, why are you up? Um, and she says, she I tucked you in already. Well, you tucked me in wrong. And he's like, obviously, because you got out.
Right.
Um, but again, so he sends them off. Maggie comes in. Again, Maggie, this entire episode, her goal is to get permission to go to the Hamptons.
Correct.
And Maggie points out, well, when Juliet was my age, she had already fallen in love, gotten married, had sex, and died. And she's trying to use this as a way to get permission to go to the Hamptons
Right.
because Maxwell says she's too young to do that. And Maxwell's response to that is, well, that's what happens when you don't listen to your father.
Right.
So it's more of like a, yeah, it's not a good way of trying to convince him as using Juliet. So,
No. No, no.
mhm. Do you have anything to add to that scene?
Um, no, I don't.
Okay.
So I'll take us into the dining room.
Yes.
So after Maxwell has sent all three kids off, um, or at least with Maggie, he's done talking to her. He walks into he meets Niles in the dining room, and he explains that he's thinking of changing the children's bedtime. And Niles asks to when, and he says right after school.
Hmm.
Um, and they're sort of confused and maybe a little concerned, but I think moreover they're annoyed that Fran's not home yet.
Hmm.
And Maxwell says, "How much rehearsal can one person need?" And Niles gives him a look, and he realizes, okay, fair. Fran needs a lot of rehearsal. Niles' problem, of course, is that the roast he made is starting to look not so hot. Um,
Hmm.
and so when Fran comes in, she's, Niles says, "Oh," she says, "Forsooth am I pooped," and Fran's told that dinner will be coming right up, and she's like, "Oh, Niles, I already ate." And he's like, "You couldn't have called? Well, it's ruined anyway." And he like stomps out of the room.
Hmm.
And Fran's like, "Boy, is he moody." And Max was like, "Well, you are rather late." And she's like, "What are you two on the same cycle? What's the problem?" "Oh, you couldn't handle the kids." And he's
Hmm.
like, he denies it, you know. And she's walking through the um around the table to get through the far door to like go, as we know, towards the living room. And he says, "Oh, don't go in there." And she says, "Why not?" And he says, "Oh, take the back stairs. They're closer." And she's like, "No, they aren't." He's like, "Yes, they are. I've measured." And she's like, "Okay." And so she fakes him out and she gets around him, too slow. And she like
Hmm.
goes into the living room. And yeah, I guess I should stop there because that's the next scene. But the trip from the dining room into the living room was what I was thinking of, that the house setup didn't make sense anymore. It didn't
Yeah.
match.
Yep. I agree.
Do you want to
That
add anything?
I also had that sense as well because at times the dining room's connected to the kitchen, and yet where Fran's coming out in the next scene does not make sense.
Right, because
Yeah.
in the so like the kitchen very well could have been where she came from to enter the scene,
Hmm.
but like it's the leaving that didn't make sense. So go ahead. Tell us, where does she come out when we get into the living room?
So in the living room, she's coming out in the back of the very far back of the living room. She's coming out from, if we're looking at it from the right side,
Exactly, which
and so
makes no sense.
it makes no sense. Um,
Continue. Sorry.
yeah. So we are now in the living room, and Fran takes in the scene. Oh my god! And she does. Again, the reason I noted that the screen blow up doll was there is because Fran does the same kind of, when she says, "Oh my God," she does the kind of the scream pose, and it's right next to her.
Right.
Like what happened here? And Maxwell, for some reasons, trying to play it off, that he had been looking for his glasses,
Mm-hmm.
and Fran's like, "What? Did you have some type of reading emergency?"
Exactly.
So uh, again, there, he's asking her why she's so late. Um, you know, she was at practice. Well, he had called and it ended at 8, and she says, "Oh, well, we went out afterwards." With who? Romeo, Mercutio, Tybalt, the gang.
Hmm.
And so this is where they start again, kind of acting like an old married couple,
Yes.
having an argument. Um, because Maxwell finally lets out the frustration with the kids, not listening, running amok. Um, and then Fran's like, it's your children when they're acting like angels, but when they're running amok, they're mine. And and then it gets. I don't have the
I,
exchange
I
word
do.
by word. Okay, go for it.
So she starts by saying, so if you don't mind, before that, they're
Mhm.
sort of cleaning up a little bit, right? And so
Mhm.
she has, what is it, a laundry basket? And so
Yes.
Maxwell tries to throw a teddy bear, which frankly looks like the bear that Gracie said she couldn't sleep without. That she couldn't sleep with. Yeah, she could not sleep without. Um, but instead of getting it in the basket, he hits Fran with the teddy bear. And so then she
Mhm.
throws, what is it, a bag of chocolates or something?
Yeah,
And instead
something
of
like that.
to him, it hits him right in like the abdomen. And they're both like, "Oh, that was a mistake." Yeah, so was this. Um,
Mhm.
and so then, as you put it, he points out that the children are running amok. Your children were running amok. And she says, "When they're sweet, adorable angels, they're yours. But when they're amok, they're mine." And he says, "You are the nanny." And she says, "And that's all you want me to be." And he
Yeah.
says, now I'm getting one of my headaches." And she says, "You know what I think? You are jealous that Philippe discovered something that was right under your nose." And he says, "And what would that be exactly?" And she responds, "My star quality." And he says, "That's like discovering the atomic bomb. Sounds good in theory, but millions will suffer." And she says,
Mm.
"Well, that's it. I'm going home to my mother." And he says, "Oh, don't bother. I'm sleeping on the couch." And she says, "If we're splitting up, I get Niles." And he says, "You couldn't afford him." And she says, "Not on what you pay me." And then they go
Mhm.
off in their separate directions. And of course, by this point, Niles has come in and he says, "It's always the butler who suffers."
Yeah, because he comes in right before Fran says, "Well, I'm gonna sleep at my mother's." And he's just standing in the background, like watching this unfold, this back and
Mm-hmm.
forth. And again, it's the classic Niles. It's always the butler who suffers.
Right. Just kind of what you said before, like them sounding like an old married couple. Like it's funny to listen to, but it also
Hmm.
doesn't really make a lot of sense considering their relationship, right?
Yeah.
Like her going home to her mother, fine. But then he says, "Oh, don't bother. I'm sleeping on the couch."
Yeah.
They have separate bedrooms.
Yes.
What difference does that make?
None.
Right.
So,
So
yeah. So, would you like to take us to the next scene?
I would love to. So we're now in Maxwell's office, and Niles is, I believe, trying to dust the books by smacking them together. And which I gotta say, it took me a while to figure out what he was doing. I guess I don't dust my books as often as I should. And Maxwell makes a comment like that he's trying to work here, and Niles tells him, "Pretend I'm not here. That's how I get through the day." And
Mm-hmm.
so Fran comes in and she starts with, "Hello, Niles," and she gives a meaningful look at Maxwell, saying nothing. And then she continues walking through the room and she goes over to Niles and says, "Niles, would you please tell Mr. Sheffield that I'm going to rehearsal unless he'd like me to sit at his feet and peel him a grape?" And Niles says, "Well, that's my job, but you can wave the fan."
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so we know that Fran is not talking to to Maxwell, and we then learn that Maxwell is not talking to Fran. And he tells Niles, "You can tell the nanny that I wouldn't dream of standing in the way of her aspirations, no matter how ludicrous they might be." And so, they're going back and forth, not talking to each other, but directing their comments to Niles. And the substance of what Fran says next is, "Tell Mr. Sheffield I'm a grown woman and I can find fulfillment any way I choose, and that he is a duty head." And so she walks out of the room. She's done with it. She leaves. And Niles says to Maxwell, "To synopsize, sir, you are a duty head."
Mm-hmm.
And Maxwell's like, "So that's the one you choose to repeat?" And Niles explains, translator's prerogative.
Mm-hmm.
And so Maxwell, by this point, is about to sit down at his desk and he says, "I don't think I've ever met a more infuriating, irritating woman." And who should walk in?
Cece.
Exactly, with her "hello, hello." And
Mm-hmm.
Niles says to Maxwell, "Think hard, sir."
Mhm.
And so Cece explains why she's in a good mood. I just heard the most delicious news. And before she can tell them, Niall says to her, well, why don't you run, make a friend, and tell them all about it? She kind of ignores him and she explains Philippe needs a tax write off. So he wants the show to flop. That's why he cast Nanny Fine to guarantee a total disaster. And Maxwell, in frankly not his best moment, says, I knew it. I knew she had no talent.
Mhm.
And Cece continues, people will be walking out in the middle of her performance, Niles adds, just like one of your dates. And
Mhm.
Maxwell says, well, we can't tell her. She'll be crushed. And Cece, grinning like a Cheshire cat, says, I know. Maxwell continues, on the other hand, if I don't tell her, then she'll be publicly humiliated opening night. And Cece, still grinning, I know. It's a win-win situation.
Mhm.
So we're not seeing the best of anyone in this scene.
No.
Do you want to add anything?
Nope, you got it. So we are then in the theater, and Fran is in her costume, and
Yes.
she's on the phone with Maggie. Because again, Maggie's asking about the whole Hampton situation, and Fran's explaining to her, well, you got to ask your father when he's watching Masterpiece Theater. And she gives a specific point, like there's a sweet spot when he's like falling asleep, but not quite asleep.
When his chin drops to his chest, but before he starts snoring.
Yes. And this is apparently how Fran got her last raise, was asking him for it in that specific moment of time.
Correct.
But then uh, Fran's being called to do the death scene. And she's like, oh, I'll have to talk to you later. I got to plunge the knife in my heart. And, she hangs up and she says to herself, oh, I'm sounding more like my mother.
Yep.
um, And so she asks Philippe about, well, what's my motivation here? She's trying to get some pointers.
Right.
And basically,
Why does
Mhm.
Juliet kill herself?
Yes. And, Philippe explains, well, without Romeo, she has nothing to live for, yada, yada, yada. And Fran's like, oh, well, you can tell this play was written by a man.
Right.
Um, Now, there's a couple of little things too. Do you want me to do the little exchange with the other actors or no?
Yeah,
Uh,
go for it. Yeah, I have that as
okay.
the same scene.
Okay. Um, so again, the other actors are like, well, how did she get this role? Because, clearly she's not that great at acting. And one's like, she's obviously, like, I think it's Romeo. Oh, she's sleeping with him. And the lady who's playing another character goes, well, I slept with him and I only got 2 lines. And then Romeo says, well, I got Romeo.
I slept with him and I got Romeo.
Yeah. So, and then there's like a little wave between Romeo and Philippe as he's getting ready to go to a scene.
Right.
So same scene or different scene?
I consider this the same scene because it's all like backstage them uh up until she's out of the
Yeah.
harness.
Okay. Okay. Um, so they're doing the death scene on stage. Um, and Romeo does his lines. Um, and then it's time for Fran to wake up.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna just interject. Philippe is sitting in a director's chair, and so he's kind of like calling out the what's supposed to happen, like the stage direction, sort of like, you
Yeah.
know, poison, Juliet awakens, etc.
Hmm.
Continue.
And so it's time for Fran, and she, oh, what a night, like stretching out
Right.
very unnaturally. And then, she's doing her lines, I see poison, and she kind of like knocks Romeo's hands to get the poison closer. And at one point she shoves him off so
Yep.
that he's on the ground.
He felt wonderfully.
Yes, yes. And then, she pulls out the oh, happy dagger. And then like of course she like puts it up and checks her teeth in it, does like her nails for a second. before she, um, says strike true. And then she has the most dramatic,
That's a way to describe it.
most dramatic, like because she had been lying up on this like kind of like table or something. I don't know how to
I think
describe it.
it's sort of like, correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't they in a mausoleum because she
Yeah,
was supposed to be dead?
yeah, but like she wasn't in a coffin or anything. It was just
No,
like
but it was like,
slab.
yeah, it was like a slab, like in a mausoleum. So don't think, so think about it like that. Like, it's kind of grayish and
Yeah,
death
yeah, yeah.
like.
Yeah, and so she had started on top of that, right? And she kind of
Right.
had sat up when she said, "Oh, what a night." Shoves off Romeo, so it's just her. She stabs herself, then she like stumbles off, but then she like does this whole thing where I don't even know how to describe it, but she's just it's the most dramatic thing. And she like makes her way around kind of in a semicircle to end
Mm-hmm.
up right in front of that slab. Um, and she like sits down in front of it and convulses and all of that. And the Philippe is so pleased with this. She's perfect. This show's gonna die faster than she does.
Bingo.
And but then the scene is not over yet because as you recall, there have been some changes made in this particular, version. They
Yes.
are going to ascend to heaven. Philippe calls out, "It's time to ascend to heaven."
And now Romeo and Juliet ascend to heaven,
Mhm.
and alive they are suddenly.
Yes, and Romeo goes up faster than Fran's Juliet. Um and and Fran's struggling with this. She's kind of swinging all over. She accidentally breaks one of the columns because there's kind of columns in a semicircle around this, the stage,
Mm-hmm.
and a domino effect occurs where she breaks the first column and then it tips over, and then all the subsequent columns around the semicircle fall. And she's like, "Don't worry, I'm okay."
Right.
But Romeo looks like he has a wedgie. So yeah. Did you want to add something to that?
So just a couple things. Thank you for describing the way she did the death scene, because I thought I was gonna have to do the scene. I was not sure how to describe it either. Um, but like, you can see throughout the scene, kind of as you've mentioned, like we can tell she acting is not her forte, right?
No.
So like, as you mentioned, she wakes up in an unnatural fashion. She stretches. What a night! And then she sees Romeo's like lying on her skirt, and she says, "Oh, I see poison has been your timeless end." And the way he's fallen, his arms are down, like his torso is on her skirt, and like his arms are below the table. And so that's why she's like poking at him, like, "I see poison, tap tap. Poison has been your timeless end." So like, he had to, like, dead Romeo had to lift his arm to give her the poison. And
Mhm.
then, as you point out, she throws him off. And then when she gets the dagger, she says, uh, "Oh, happy dagger, this is thy sheath," which would have been, if you think about it, Juliet's about going to stab herself with it. So she should say that right before she stabs herself. And like,
Mhm.
after she stabbed herself, would say the next line of, "Here, here let you stay, and here let you rot me rotten." So I don't remember the next line, but instead, as you point out, she checks her teeth, and then she also tests the knife to make sure it's not a real knife, which
Oh, yeah.
as we'll see in the next scene, is a good thing because she's not very popular with the cast.
Mhm.
Um, and then she does the whole dying part, and then, you know, as they're being lifted, I'm not sure if Fran is struggling so much as she's being forced to struggle by the people operating the harness, right?
Mhm.
Because like, at one point she says, "God, hey guys, heaven that away,"
Mhm.
because she's like swinging all over the place.
Mhm.
Um, and that's when she ruins one pillar, and then all the other pillars fall. The last thing I'll say is, I it would have been fun to be the like physics consultant to make sure that worked.
Mhm.
So that's all I wanted to say.
Okay. Take us to the next scene.
So we're now backstage, and Fran is no longer in the harness, and she's trying to be her, usual friendly self, and she goes and sits down next to that woman who couldn't understand how Fran got Juliet, and she makes a comment about how that harness really chafes, that Mary Martin must have had a hide like a rhino, and then the woman she's talking to just kind of like grimaces at her, and Fran's like, I know you. And the woman's like, well, I have done 6 Broadway shows and several national tours. And Fran's like, no, it was a commercial. You're the less than fresh girl. Like that's the thing that she knows this woman from. And then anyway, Maxwell comes in, and before like Fran even greets him as Mr. Sheffield, the other actors and actresses have sort of started to notice him. But then she says, Mr. Sheffield. And it's like he's totally mobbed by everyone because they
Oh yeah.
know who he is. He's a complete celebrity with them. And so like Fran goes over and is like, guys, let him breathe, go away, like give him some space. And the woman says, God, she's sleeping with everybody. And
Mhm.
Romeo responds, watch, next year she'll have her own sitcom.
Mhm.
So Maxwell says to her that, I was selfish and thoughtless and I'm extremely sorry. And she says, well, thank you, Mr. Sheffield. I'm sorry I called you a duty head. And he says, apology accepted. And she says, we really shouldn't fight anymore. It's so hard on Niles, which is delightful. Um,
Yeah.
so Maxwell says he wants to talk to her and, maybe you should sit down. And she's like, I think I know. Okay, but I think I know what you're going to say. And so they sit down on the slab from the scene. And he's like, basically, I highly doubt that. And she's like, yeah, yes, I do. You're going to say that you and the kids really need me at home. And the mansion is a mess and I don't belong in this play. And you'd be absolutely right. He's like, I would. She's like, yeah, isn't that what you were going to say? And he's like, yes. Oh, yes, exactly. You read my mind. And so she's basically agreeing, like, she's not going to be in the show anymore. And she's like, I just hope. And what I thought was interesting is she says Philip instead of Philippe. I just
Mhm.
hope Philip won't be too disappointed. He really was counting on me. And Maxwell says, well, Miss Fine, a talent like yours doesn't come around every day. And she says, true. But between you, me, and the pillars, that Philippe is not the greatest director in the world. And if I'm going to make my big Broadway debut, I should do it right in one of your plays.
Mhm.
Yeah, he didn't really care for that suggestion so much.
Mhm. Yeah, he was so happy when she says that's what you were gonna say, and he's like, yeah, yeah. But she notes that there's she's like, yeah, I know. There's clairvoyance runs in my family.
Yes, yes,
Her who predicted her aunt predicted
her
Hurricane
aunt.
Andrew, and so that was the one time Miami Beach was devoid of any Jewish people.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. Yes,
Yes. I don't have anything else to add. So
super. Would you
we're
like to take us to the living room?
yes. Yes, so we're back in the living room, and this is a very quick scene. You can hear that masterclass theater is on, um, and Maxwell's kind of nodding off, and Fran's like watching intently. And then right as his chin drops, she's like, Maggie, make the move. And so Maggie is like, Daddy, like, can I go to the Hamptons? And he goes kind of in that drowsy, because first she asks, Are you asleep?
Right,
No, like, and then, Can I go to the Hamptons? Sure, honey. When Miss Fine gets her next raise. And he's obviously not in that correct state. And Fran's even like, oh, ever since Alistair Cook left, he doesn't sleep as well. Um,
right.
so it's a fail. It's a fail.
Yeah, and I'll point out we've never met Alice, so
hmm
just an odd thing to say. So,
Uh,
um,
well,
go ahead.
is that a person? I thought it was associated with masterclass theater.
Oh, I took it as because what she says is, "Oh, ever since Alice the cook left, he doesn't sleep as well." I assumed it was
I thought he said Alistair Cook, but okay, I don't know.
I every time I thought it was Alice the cook, as in like the cook that
Yeah,
did the
I
cooking
thought it was.
previously.
Let's see, Alistair Cook. Is that a thing? A British American author, journalist, television personality, radio broadcaster,
Huh.
masterpiece theater from 1971 to 1992. So yeah, at that point he would have left. Um, so yeah, Alistair Cook.
Oh, that makes way more sense than Alice the Cook because there was no Alice the Cook. Okay,
Okay. Do you want to take
cool.
us to the last bit?
I actually didn't take any notes on it, so I'll let you do it.
It's just Fran hanging at the uh at the theater because someone calls lunch. It darkens. Oh people, wherefore art thou, everyone? She's just left hanging, literally.
Aw, poor Fran.
Yes.
Poor Fran. Um, do you have any overarching things we should talk about
Yeah, again, I think
besides?
we've kind of brushed on it, just that like the set is just not consistent in
It's
this
true.
episode. Um, but yeah, other than that, I didn't really have any separate thing. Did you?
No, no, it was just same thing with the set being weird.
Hmm.
Um, would you like to start with favorite fashion?
Sure.
There was a lot
Um,
of fashion in this episode.
hmm so I didn't write it down exactly, so I can't recall like, the exact thing because she has like is it a black or a red kind of vest with the white blouse? Does that ring a bell? Am I just making something
So
up?
there was the red vest with the red shirt.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Hmm.
That's what I was thinking of.
Why don't you start, Debbie?
Okay, sure. There are a couple different things I'd want to talk about. Um, first, we're seeing Maggie wearing things that have a little bit more personality. You know, we see her in I think three different dresses plus her school uniform, and at least two of them are floral. So in the first scene, she's wearing. I actually rather liked two of her dresses. This one I liked. It was a short sleeve white dress, kind of like a skater dress. It was a white background with different colored flowers. I like that. And then in the last scene, or the penultimate scene, she's wearing a like a pale green dress with pink and pale pink and pale yellow flowers, and it has these like wispy short sleeves. I also like that. Um, Fran's fashion, in the first scene, she's wearing um, her, I think it's a leopard print um, shirt under a black vest and then black pants. That's sort of a look we've seen on her before. And then of the things she wore that was my favorite, I really liked what she wore in the penultimate scene. She has this black pants and then a black shirt. The shirt has like bell sleeves and it's sort of like um, not not fully opaque, the sleeves, and then over it is a vertically striped vest. That's black with gold and gray. I really like that. Um, I did not like Cece's hair in this episode.
I was
Or
gonna mention like Cece's hair was very different this episode.
I don't know why.
I don't either. How would you describe it? It's like curled but old fashioned.
It's an updo, right? So like,
Yeah.
and then yeah, it's curled, and the curls are sort of like, I guess, pinned on the top of her head.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very severe look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What you might have been thinking of, she had a when she was in the scene in the office, she was wearing, I think, black. I can't remember if it was a skirt or pants, but then she had a red shirt with a black and white checkerboard vest over it.
Mhm.
Is
Well,
that
and also thinking to the scene where they're practicing in the living room and they're
yes?
doing a balcony scene, the kiss, there's like she has a velvety top, right?
Yes, it's red.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it in some ways is a little bit reminiscent of like a more of a Renaissance or like old timey type of silhouette, maybe.
Yes.
So, but yeah. But I believe the bathrobe she wears in the dining room scene at the beginning of the episode is one we've seen before.
Okay.
I
I
think so. I
n-
don't.
no
I
one has
haven't
asked us to
cataloged. Yeah, nobody's asked
exactly
us, so we're not.
or not. And I think we're now past the point of entertaining that request. Wouldn't you
Yeah,
agree? Okay,
you missed
awesome.
out.
You missed out. You should have asked us while we were still in season 1, but now we're in season 2, so we're not doing that.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't really have anything else to add.
So I'll just describe the shirt that you were describing a little bit more. So yes, it's red velvety. It's off the shoulders, but then over it, there's another red vest. So like her bra straps would be covered, and then the undershirt has these nice bell sleeves.
Hmm.
And as we're doing this, I realized where my teenage love of bell sleeves came from. So
There you go.
I didn't realize that until we started doing this podcast. So
Hmm.
look at that. Shall we jump to notable New Yorkers?
Yes, there's actually, I think, quite a few.
I'll let you
Um,
start.
okay, obviously, Romeo and Juliet
Yes.
by William Shakespeare.
Yes.
Um, and actually, the title of this episode, "A Star is Unborn," is a play on "A Star is Born."
Yes.
Um, do you have more info on that one?
No, that one didn't occur to me.
Oh,
But as soon as you said it, I'm like, yes, that is totally right. I believe it's a movie.
yes.
Um, I
And isn't
believe
it Barbara?
yeah, I believe Barbara Streisand starred in the original. I think it was actually just redone a few years ago.
Oh, with
Um,
Lady Gaga.
there you go. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Um, so obviously Sound of Music, another
Hmm.
musical, and the character Reverend Mother in that, and then the Baroness.
Hmm.
Um, and then they reference different types of awards, Oscar, Tonys. Um, let's see here.
While you're looking, also in Romeo and Juliet is Friar Lawrence,
Mm-hmm.
who Maxwell played in high school.
Yes. And he had to play him because Jeremy Irons went to his school.
Yes.
And Jeremy Irons is an actor.
He's a British actor and activist known for starring on the West End, including numerous Shakespearean plays. He also got his big break in the television series Brideshead Revisited. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm. Brighton references Dracula. Um,
Yes.
obviously, a novel written by Bram Stoker.
Also a
Um,
vampire,
yes.
the title
Again, we
character.
yes we saw The Scream again by Edward Munch. We've talked about that before on the
Mm-hmm.
podcast. Now, I I don't know because I couldn't quite hear it in the dining room when they're waiting for Fran.
Hume Cronin.
Okay. Do you
So
have info?
yes, Hume Cronin was a Canadian actor who often appeared professionally with his wife of 50 years, Jessica Tandy. What I thought was particularly interesting is that he is known for his role in the 1945 version of The Postman Always Rings Twice, which was referenced by Fran in a prior episode.
Mm,
When he
okay.
cleared that table, ooh, ha. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Um, let's see here.
While you're looking, I'll mention the Queen as a reference
Oh
to
yeah.
Queen Elizabeth, who's still
Mm-hmm.
the reigning monarch. Um, there's, as you mentioned, Stratford upon Avon,
Mm-hmm.
which, according to its official webpage, is a market town with more than 800 years of history, containing not only many buildings that survive today and would have been familiar to Shakespeare, but also a thriving community offering a wide variety of leisure, accommodation, and shopping experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's where Shakespeare lived in his
Yeah,
play.
it's now a tourist attraction.
Yes. And then Fran mentions Avon, the cosmetics
Right.
company. Um, Mary Martin. I believe we talked about her before, haven't
I
we?
think we did, but
Is,
just in
isn't she Peter Pan?
yes,
And that's again the reference whenever she's hoisted up with the harness.
yes. Interestingly, according to Wikipedia, Mary Martin also played Maria von Trapp in The
Oh,
Sound of Music
like in the like
stage
musical.
production. Yeah. So
Interesting.
she apparently was a muse for Rodgers and Hammerstein. Um,
Oh, okay.
and interestingly, she died in 1990, so she would have been somewhat front of mind.
Yes. Okay. Hurricane Andrew
Mm-hmm.
with
Uh,
Miami Beach.
a Category 5 hurricane in 1992. It was the most destructive hurricane to hit Florida based on the structures destroyed or damaged. At the point that this episode aired, it also would have been the most financially costly hurricane
Mm,
to that point. It was more recently surpassed by Hurricane Irma.
hmm We've already discussed Alistair Cook. Apparently, again, he was involved with Masterpiece Theater until he, you know, passed away. Do you have any additional items on your list?
Just on Masterpiece Theater, it's now known simply as Masterpiece. It's a dramatic anthology that premiered on PBS in 1971, and it has presented multiple British productions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but otherwise, that's it.
Okay,
So
we did it.
woohoo! So in Yiddish, the only reference other than the repeated use of the word "oi," which we've talked about on previous episodes, is the reference to that Fran made to how before Hurricane Andrew there wasn't a single Jew on the beach on Miami Beach um, because of her clairvoyant aunt. So I actually did a little digging, and there's according to JewishMiami.org, and I quote, in the 1970s, about 80% of the population on Miami Beach was Jewish. By 1980, the greater Miami Jewish population reached its all-time peak of 230,000 people.
Wow.
But what I thought was more interesting from this article was that Florida was actually one of the last states to develop a substantial Jewish population. And even within Florida, Miami was one of the latest communities to have a noticeable Jewish population. Um, yeah, there for anyone who's interested, it was a great article. Again, it was on jewishmiami.org. It talked about how population trends and when people migrated, and at one point the Jewish population was down to one person.
Oh, wow.
It was literally down to one person, and then they're like, and then he married, and it was like, okay, cool. And so
Mhm.
it was just so interesting that the population had started to grow, and then it basically was decimated and down to one guy, and then it grew again, and then it started declining again. So,
Mhm. The only other thing too is the whole thing with when she says Gentile instead of gentle.
oh, fair.
Did
Um,
I look down his tights?
that's again a reference to circumcision,
Yep.
which we've talked about previously.
Yes. Recently too.
I think we talked about it last week.
Yep. Okay, so 90s nostalgia.
So, Fran's red velvet bell sleeved shirt to me seemed very dated.
Yeah. Mhm. The phones. Again, I
Yes.
noticed again in like both Maxwell's office, the handheld, um, and then what Fran's using when she's talking with Maggie at the theater.
Hmm.
Um, and you know what? Even like when Niles is like, you couldn't have called, like nowadays it could have been a text, right? You could
Right.
have texted the heads up.
Right.
Yep, the super soakers took me back.
Oh, we weren't allowed to have those when I was a kid. So
Oh, really?
my parents didn't want us to have any type of gun.
Uh, no, we definitely would not have been allowed to use them inside.
Yeah, that seems just like a poor choice and a good way to ruin things,
Yes.
like the couch.
But like the kind of blanket fort they had, that took me back to childhood as well.
Fair.
Did you ever do any kind of blanket fort?
We instead used the couch cushions.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember us ever getting blankets involved. I just remember us like taking the couch cushions like and moving them around and building like houses with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we would often incorporate the cushions with blankets and chairs, like
See,
strategically placed.
see, doing it strategically placed like that would give you much more real estate to work with than we had.
Hmm.
We weren't that clever, apparently.
Was there anything else?
Old cars.
Yes. Yes. Um,
That's all I got.
Again, some of the outfits you mentioned that Maggie wore seemed very 90s to me.
Mm.
Like that kind of floral pattern in particular seemed
The white
90s,
patterned one or the green one or both?
or probably both.
Okay,
Um, but one of them for sure was like made me think that's the 90s. I just can't recall which.
fair.
Yeah.
So unless you have anything else in our
Nope.
90s, okay. So Bernadette and I talked about it, and today we're going to introduce a new part-time shtick, which we're going to call Kiss Count. Um,
Mhm.
in this shtick, we are going to keep track of all the times that Fran and Maxwell kiss. Today's kiss count is 2. This was
Yep.
number 2. The first one, as you may recall, was towards the end of season 1, where Fran gave a glowing review of Cece and Maxwell's show when Frank Bradley was out sick with food poisoning. And to thank her, Maxwell kissed her. So this is number 2.
Yeah. And it was a good one.
It was. It totally was. Um, okay, so then jumping to future fun. Niles, as we've kind of talked about multiple times, Niles had commented on how when he had told the family that when he was in high school, he played the Baroness. And when he was going to rehearse with Fran, he warns her that they're still talking about my Baroness. And she says, I'm still thinking about it and I didn't even see it. So he's basically indicating that his stage debut was a triumph. What's interesting is that in season 6, he gets cast in a stage production at Gracie's school. And to say goes less than stellarly is an understatement. Like, he totally bombs it. It's a total disaster.
Maybe that's
Maybe
why they're
that's too
still
strong.
talking about it.
Oh, maybe that I like that interpretation better. And then the only other future fun thing I'll mention is, we've previously heard threats to Brighton about being sent off to military school or boarding school. This is the first time I think we hear the potentiality of Gracie being sent to boarding school, and that threat that, when Brighton's chasing her around, I'm the CC monster and I'm going to marry dad and send you off to boarding school. Ah, is her response.
Mhm.
In season 5, there is some thought/confusion about whether Gracie will be sent off to boarding school.
Oh. Hmm.
So, is there anything else we need to talk about? Oh, we need to do our rating. How
Yes.
silly of
And
me.
you go first this time.
You know what? For once, I'm actually happy to go first.
Hmm.
I am giving this episode a 5. I'm giving it a 5, primarily on the basis of the scene where Fran and Maxwell are playing Juliet and Romeo, respectively, and that kiss. That is one of my favorite scenes in the entire series. I I love it so much. Yeah, I'm giving it a 5, despite the fact that Maxwell is totally unsupportive, and how all of the Sheffields are totally unsupportive of Fran's wanting to go on the stage, and Cece being frankly mean, although she's usually mean, so that's not that surprising. Um, I'm giving it a 5 based on the scene of them doing Romeo and Juliet. And yeah, your turn.
We're on a roll for a second week in a row. We're both giving it a 5.
Woohoo!
Totally agree with that scene of them rehearsing. I also enjoyed it's so hard on Niles. Like,
Yes.
so yeah, it was a great episode. Um, and yeah, I would recommend people look up at least that scene of them practicing, because him leaping up and then being so close before the kiss, like, it's such a great build up.
It's marvelous.
I mean,
I,
again, they're like mesmerized by each other. It's great.
and I mean, I'm not gonna lie, the focus for me has always been after their kiss
Mhm.
and Fran's reaction and how like she's knocked off her feet, if you will.
Mhm.
Like she can't walk down the stairs like a normal person because
Yep.
she's so taken up by the kiss.
Mhm.
I just I love that.
And then it's just like she loves pouring the salt in Cece's wound. Like, I'm gonna have to practice a lot.
Right, right. I mean, Cece sort of brings that on herself though.
Mhm.
Like Cece couldn't have just like left when
But
she's like, "Good luck."
but yeah, but Maxwell too is kind of in a daze after as well.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love it so much.
Mhm.
All right. Well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited the nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 30, Pishki Business.
If you'd like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.